us a little bit about what she's done with maps. Wayne, what have you done stuff with Google Maps or Story Maps or any of the other ones?
No, I've used Eris a bit, but other beyond that, I haven't really done a lot with Google Maps.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are there questions?
Yeah, this is totally unrelated. Connor, is it possible to access that book? Read it?
Yes, for the price of $5.99.
I knew that.
It's available on
Did you
iBooks.
come to the Ingersoll?
Sorry?
Did you come to the Ingersoll meeting?
Yes.
Okay, that's where I remember you from.
Okay, fantastic. So you've heard this before.
Well, no, I haven't heard this,
Okay.
but I'm curious about the book because I do a lot of stuff with Scandinavian. In fact, you just said, oh, I wonder if I could figure out how to go back to school and do something in Scandinavian Studies. Because that was one of my goals a long time ago. I've just kind of done it. But I would love to read the book.
Yes. So the book is available for $5.99 on iBooks, which means that you have to have either an iPad or an Apple computer.
Yep.
You can get it on an iPhone, but I don't recommend that because one of the features of iBooks is that the formatting is rigid, which allows me to get such a beautiful display, but it really means it's hard to read on an iPhone. So I recommend it on iPad or on an Apple computer.
And what was the name of it again? I know it's got
Let's see, at the very...
Icelandic names in it.
Yes. So to search for it,
Yeah.
you should search either my name or
Well, that
the
would-
word e-saga, because you're not going to find anything else called e-saga on iBooks right now. But it's the e-saga of Hrafnkel Freysgodi, and
Because I love reading Icelandic.
yes, or with Icelandic pronunciation, it's Hrafnkel Freysgodi. It's probably the most difficult name to be in the title of an Icelandic saga. So of course we pick it as the introduction for students.
Okay.
But we pick it as the introduction because it really it's short, so it's easy to digest, and it really covers so many important points of early Icelandic society and medieval literature, and the conflict is between a powerful chieftain and a farmer who has a lot of knowledge of the law. So he decides to take on his chieftain and prosecute him in court. And so he has to learn what it means to be a chieftain then and take on this role in court. And so as he's learning how to do these things, students learn with him. So it's a wonderful introduction to it.
Thank you. Off topic.
Yeah. Will you tell us again about what you have done with Google Maps? Because I feel like that's a slightly different application from what Colin did, but I think it's really cool.
All right. I last spring led some walking tours at the Arboretum, and when the crab apples were in bloom, and there are hundreds of them, and they all have their name on them, but sometimes it's hard to find the name. So what I went out to do was a pre-tour and singled them out. There is a map online. The Arboretum has a map that shows where trees are and their names, but it's not something you can easily access. So I went out and made my own little tour using Google Maps and then just put a pin for each tree that I highlighted. Gave a little, put their name down and what color their blossoms were. And then as we did the tour, I knew that they could go back and replicate the tour. I also did it for the lilacs, and I did a layer. So lilacs were in purple, crab apples were in pink. It wasn't very sophisticated, but it was enough that you wouldn't go back. If there was one you had seen that you really liked, you could find it back.
How did you do the locate? Were you out in the Arboretum and you had a mobile device? So
Yes.
You knew exactly where you
Yes,
were?
yes.
It's not like doing a map online and zooming in.
No, it wasn't. And so therefore, I had to do a lot of judgment. I would pick one on their map that I could see was definite, and then I would go out. You know, it wasn't to the GPS coordinate totally. That was the frustrating part for me, was trying to figure out how to do it more specifically. But when you're in that little of a location, I couldn't find anything that would burrow down that far. Now, I know the Arboretum has been working on some things. And I like to think it's because I started it with that. I don't know. But they were very intrigued as well. And the people I had on my walk were very intrigued, because then they knew they could go back and find something. And my thought was, as a learning tool, you only look at these things when they're in bloom. But do they keep their leaves late in the fall? What color do they get in the fall? My idea was they could go back and find the same tree and see what it looked like later on in the season. And that's, now when I see you say something about this story, the last one you showed.
Yeah, story maps.
I don't know how far you can burrow down in that one.
Like if the GPS is tighter, you mean?
Yeah.
I'm not sure about that.
So, and John and I have talked about that, how we could make that work like a walking tour, even on campus, for trees and shrubs. So if you had students, and you wanted them to see certain kinds of maples,
Right.
you could make a map of the maples. And my students come after all the leaves go off, which, you know, if they were real botany students, they should still be able to identify, but we're not at that level. But you'd like to be able to have them have something they could go around on their own pace.
Yeah. And that's kind of what, if I understand correctly, that's kind of what Eris does, right?
Yeah.
So have you played with that, Lane?
Yeah, so Eris is basically it's a creation tool that enables you to do that type of mapping plotting on a map,
Okay.
but turning it into a game. They kind of design it around a game. So there's lots of other layers you can put onto it. But if you were to strip it all down, basically it's doing what you're suggesting.
Right.
And it goes really specific. But
Well,
I'm curious as why.
I've gone to a couple of the figure something out Eris, but all of a sudden it gets too three-dimensional for me, and I have a hard time putting it all together.
There's a button. You just pop it, it goes back flat.
Well,
But the thing I was wondering is, like, what were your troubles if you're using Google? Like, it plots pretty close. If you're having problems.
I mean, we're talking trees that are only 2 or 3 feet apart.
And
So-
you're in the Arboretum, which you're probably not on public roads, because
Right.
mostly Google.
You're in the middle of a big
identifies the
field.
public roads
Right.
in. There are a few places where I found, like on campus here, I was able to get Google to say, if I want a walking directions from this location to this location, it'll go off public roads.
Sure.
But if all of the walking paths in the Arboretum are marked, or if, you're talking about trees that are this far apart,
Yeah.
then
Yeah,
how do you
that's true.
pinpoint which one?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it isn't quite, I was asking it to do something that it's capable of doing on a much more finite, or,
Right.
So if
Yeah.
you wanted
Yeah.
to invest in a handheld GPS,
That-
kit, like what hikers use, that
Yes.
can get more precise about the spot
You
and the
could.
elevation.
Yeah,
And then download, export the points.
Right.
and just-
right,
but maybe what you want, or maybe what would work better, is instead of taking the tech solution of buying a more expensive GPS unit to be able to differentiate between 2 feet apart with 2 trees, is if you have a drawn map of the Arboretum and to be able to draw these things in. And I don't know this, but I'm just speculating whether you might be able to upload a JPEG for a map into Story Maps and then be able to plunk points onto it with it.
yeah.
That way you have the detail and be able to show all the things you want, which you're not going to be able to get with a satellite photograph
Right.
and GPS,
Right.
but still be able to navigate through it in the way that you want.
Sid, what about the different, you were showing me this in Google Earth, that you can overlay somebody else's map. Could that be something that if Eileen had another map that she could overlay it, or is that kind of complicated?
And if someone, like, I don't know what the Arboretum is doing with their,
I don't know, I haven't talked to him now, because that'll be in the spring again, we'll start over. And I knew that by the time next spring came around, things would have gotten better, you know, things things.
Oh, shoot.
And I'd start over and figure out if there was something better than what I had done. But I need to look at Eris again.
Yeah,
I have looked at it, but I've just not been able to.
Part of what Eris can do is for field research.
Yeah.
So if you're out in the field and your phone's GPS knows you're here,
Yep.
there's a way to do something in Eris that says, like, take a picture, and then it'll geoconnect the picture with the place.
Okay.
So it doesn't have to be a game.
No, I guess I couldn't, I have a hard time sometimes if somebody lays something in front of me to see past what they've already suggested to me. And
Right, so being able to see it is not a game when it was.
yes,
presented as
I
a
have a
game. Yeah.
really hard time coming up with my own interpretation of what something can do.
The Eris works as well. They have a game. It is game based, but it's a stripped down version of Eris, and it does just what you're saying. Like that's it.
Oh.
So it's a different program. You have to go to their website. I can't remember what it's called. I keep thinking Spotify, but I know it's not right. But it's that's all it does is you go to locations and it wants you to pick out, look at a tree, take a picture of it, and it'll snap it on, it'll snap it onto a Google map, and so then your class can go back
And find it.
type in the login or a number, and then they can see everyone's pictures that they've taken around campus and see the different trees, or the different buildings or architectural points, or I think one was on the Indian Mound on campus, plotting those as well for the class. So that was I think it gets very resolute. But I wasn't sure what program are we talking about. If we aren't talking about Google Earth, we're talking about
We've been talking about Google Maps.
Maps.
That's what we started with.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
But then Colin's also telling us, do you want to show us the storyline?
Yeah.
Story maps?
Yeah.
So this might be different because I'm viewing it on my iPad right now instead of on a computer. But when I viewed this at home on my computer, these fish were swimming. Sure. Yeah, I can open it up. So.
You
what do
look
you-
it up and I'll do the case.
Okay.
You can hit the green button in the upper left will just maximize its full screen.
Great.
Are they supposed to be moving here too?
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, maybe Story Maps isn't everything I thought it was,
I
but
wonder if there's a plugin or something?
perhaps maybe there's just a plugin that's necessary. But when I viewed this at home, these fish were swimming, and I was quite impressed to see a video in the background. And so this this one reads a bit more like a blog with pictures and text, and shows you sort of the story of this this area being. Sorry, but it's not supported yet.
Oh,
So-
Chrome Safari. Well, let's open up Chrome Safari.
Yeah. Okay. So let's copy the link. Oops.
That's Chrome. Let's try that.
This looks similar to what's becoming popular in journalism, long-form journalism, like you see in the New York Times, where they have a lot of media integrated with the story.
Yeah.
Like that.
I mean, very similar, and the way that you now have often interactive maps in news stories too. So, let's see if I.
Come on, silly fish.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've had some trouble with Chrome recently, which is why I'm using Firefox.
It's really
Well-
interesting. Chrome, some things it will do fine, and other
way.
Well, also I think this building maybe doesn't have the best wireless internet in it, because these sites load just in a flash when I'm at home. So I don't think that this is representative of
You can do wired.
story maps.
Should we try that?
Sure,
While we're waiting, can I ask a question about Iceland?
please.
The landscape looked so desolate. I mean, 1,000 years ago, was it that barren, or were there trees, and was it more lively looking?
So our earliest historical accounts say that that there were trees from the shores to the mountains. What those trees were, though, is not what you would expect if you're familiar with Scandinavia. They were dwarf birches, so kind of short, scrubby things, and just the quality of the dwarf birches and the birches that they had only grow to maybe about 30 feet in height. So they're not very tall forests, nothing that you would use for building ships. And the joke in Iceland is, what do you do if you get lost in an Icelandic forest? Stand up, but the trees are really short. So the landscape was not as open when Norse settlers came in the Viking Age. But they started cutting down trees, expecting them to pop back up like they did in Scandinavia, but because of the very fragile subarctic conditions, there's a lot of erosion, and the trees did not replenish themselves. And so the story of Iceland's settlement and continuing generations is one of environmental change. So the landscape today is much more open and barren, but pretty much always since the settlement, it's only been sort of the edges around the coast that have been habitable with arable land that's good for farming. The center part of the country has sort of always been a highland desert. And so that's an important part of this story, is that the chieftain takes a very leisurely route to get to the court around the coast, visiting all of his friends, taking his time. Whereas the farmer, who really doesn't want to cross paths with this powerful chieftain, takes the route through the center of, yay, fishies! He takes the route through the middle of the country, through the highlands, where there's no good grazing. There's, water is very sparse. Bad weather can come up and there's nowhere to seek shelter. So it's a much more dangerous route, but a faster one. So it's a cost-benefit analysis of what's more important. And so there's a lot of folklore in Iceland about how these highland spaces are dangerous places to go through. So having this kind of geographical understanding is really important to understanding why these two guys take different routes to get to court, because not much is actually said about it in the text, because the medieval audience was fully aware of their choices and the landscape that they were going through. But thanks for the question about Iceland. Now we've got some swimming fishies. This is fantastic. So I'll go back just to scrolling through this story map. So I just love the way that they are able to incorporate video into a background, and this is just such a vivid and wonderful sort of form of a blog or long form journalism, and the way that you can have and the way that you can keep moving through it, so the text moves as you scroll through, and then it snaps you straight to the next part of the map that it wants you to focus on. So it's a very elegant way of taking you through and taking you into a new landscape as well. So I'd love to play around with this. I haven't gotten to it yet. But this is, in the way that it can just slide you. It kind of reminds me of those of ancient Chinese scrolls, the way that they open out, you close them from one end and open from the other, and you have text and landscape together. This in many ways evokes that kind of old medium that is so elegant for just creating motion and bringing you through a landscape and telling a story at the same time.
Is there a bottom to the page?
Eventually you get to a bottom, but it just kind of keeps bringing you through slides, and then you get down to the end of the story, and you can go and follow through to discover more story maps by this team, and it gives you a link to the map data from the National Park Service as well. So there's a lot of cool things that you can do with story maps. I haven't fully explored them, particularly because it doesn't seem to fit the needs of what I'm trying to deliver to students, with so many place names and not a clear, here's chapter 1, here's chapter 2, here's chapter 3, let's move through it, because characters are just going back and forth and it's kind of a mess. And so I think that Google Maps is very good for opening up that and untangling that mess. But all of these are great tools that are fairly easy to learn how to do, which you can use for either making your own materials in the classroom, or you could assign as projects to your students to make maps for topics that you are having them research in your classes.
Awesome. Okay, with that, let's transition and make sure we get to the hands-on portion. So you have an activity sheet. Sid and I were having some fun as we were making this up this week, because we were like, oh, there's so many things that are so easy that you can do on Google Maps. So if there's something on here that you haven't done before, try doing it. I gave you a link on the back, about halfway down under Share a Map. I gave you a link to a map that I was playing around with this week, which is super simple, but just shows a few of the features. You want to go there?
Sure.
It's just bit.ly/ it's right here. Yeah, it's right back here. Oh, I got it. It's just right there. So it's way simpler than any of this, but try something out and try it. If you have a question about how to do something that's on here, let us know. If you have a question about something that isn't on here, and if it's possible, just keep asking. Super simple map.
Woo!
Ta-da!
That's a beautiful map.
Yeah, but look at this. I thought was really fun, because you can do, like, I did a polygon, so this is
Okay.
the view from my window, my view from my window,
Okay.
right? That's like my window. So, but it was fun to do a polygon and like shade it in, so you could do like this area has a lot of this sort of, like, you could show different. I mean, in your maps you could show different kinds of vegetation, or you could show this is the area that was controlled by
By this
Ford
chief,
Cow,
yeah, exactly.
Right? This is what was controlled by Ford this or whatever.
Yeah.
Anyway. And look, check out my. I have a custom icon right here. Oh, whoops, that's not what I. Yeah, can you see what that is?
Yes, you have bagels.
Bagels is an icon.
Bagels as an icon to represent the active teaching lab and
Yes.
our delicious breakfasts.
Yes, because you can just pick any picture. Like, I thought you had to find something that was like an icon file, but if you just like, I just Googled bagel images
All right.
and like found an image and then put in the URL and it went through it. So anyway, yeah, that's cool. Have you done all the stuff on here? You did. You told me all of this.
Well, yeah,
Sid put in some stuff about the KML down there, which you've also done. so
Cool.
you know this is good. Have you heard of all these other tools though? Like John pulled up all these, and I'm like, I suppose John didn't put all this on here because he likes
That's okay.
No, these are all new tools for me to explore, so that's cool.
That question, and I'll shoot it back to you.
Cool, cool.
Thank you.
Okay, I have another question, Connor. Excellent question.
Yes.
I wish I would have had something like this to read Burial Rights.
Yes.
Have you read that book?
No.
Burial Rights, you would love this book. Burial Rights is a book, historical book, about the first woman that was executed in Iceland. And the author is Kristen Hanna. And she went over there and she did a lot of research because it was the mores of the time. And it's got place names and it's got the geographic location. And she includes one picture with the book. But it's not as all-encompassing, but it would be so nice to have some of these pictures because they describe when they have to go from the farm to the local village where she's incarcerated, and the clergy and what their place looks like. And it's really a fascinating book, but the
yeah, the landscape in Iceland is so just awe-inspiring.
That's my
And
next bucket list place. I'm trying to tell my daughter.
and I really think that photographs are so essential to making this come alive and to be able to capture that sense of place. And you say in this book that you read, there's only one map, and
One picture.
or one picture,
Yeah.
which yeah, it doesn't really do justice to the variation in the
Well, and I
landscape.
could see in that book you could have, even though you didn't have all the place names, you could have pictures of structures. Or, maybe they might not be the exact structure, but historical, what houses looked like in that period of time. What a church or the town square, or whatever they had. Because it would just bring that so to life. She was a very good descriptive writer, so you could paint the pictures, but sometimes the little clues would help augment it.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah.
Does anybody have a field of study or field of expertise for which we have not yet talked about how maps could be useful? Sid and I were talking about this yesterday, that as a cartographer, geographer type, Sid is like, lots of things. Everything has a spatial.
Yes.
You want to say your line instead of me trying to pull what you're saying. Everything has a spatial geographical connection. It's just a matter of finding it or something like that.
But you like history.
Yeah, I think definitely. I don't want to keep hitting on areas. I'm not hitting on, but like touting them. But I mean, it seems like they've done really good stuff as well. If you go to their website, the Dow Day example they have on their website. So basically, what it is, it's a tutorial or a tour that walks students through the Dow Day protests in the 1960s on campus.
Yeah.
And so they have it gamified, so you're like a reporter reporting on what's happening. So you have to walk over to Memorial Union and talk to the Dow representative who's named Napalm. Like, well, we do a lot more than Napalm. We're just trying to get students some jobs. They're chemists. We do chemistry. That's what's going on. We make napalm because the government asks us to. It's our civil responsibility. When you walk up to the hill, up Bascom Hill, and they'll say, your editor will say, hey, why don't you go check out what's going on in the Bascom Hill? I see some students gathering. Ask them what's going on. So you walk up there, and you walk, it locates you geographically, and then you see pictures based upon where you're standing. You're looking at the same exact spot 60 years ago, 40 years ago during the Dow Day protest, and you see all these protesters, and then you see a video that's trapped in the exact location you're at, and then you look at it as you ask questions. So that they use maps to trigger events in a game using your phone. That's how they use it. But there's lots of ways that people have used it as well, in terms of going around and locating items on campus, like doing a campus tour. But the historical side of it is really interesting because you can go to different locations and see and interact with this really well, and using that GIS kind of locate where you're at and give you really contextualized information about the history of that spot and what happened there. And that's where it's really cool for history, but that requires a ton of work, and it's very specialized to a location.
Yeah, like you have to be in the location. Are there other ways that Google Maps could be used, or a map could be used if you're not there, like without the?
I've seen some really cool stuff in terms of, I use it in my class a ton. What they do is they overlay a map on top of Google, and I used it in this room, actually.
Oh.
And what they did is they had the history of every world empire from 6000 BC to present. And you walk through and see how the empires change, or how the U.S. Civil War, how those different states join or leave the Union. And I was using it in my class to say, okay, look at the French Empire, look at the British Empire, they're advancing in tree. This is what's going on right here. In this location, we can zoom in and see how these borders are changing, how different aspects of history is changing. And that's what I think Sid is bringing up right here.
Yeah,
You can see historical, political maps change. You can see population maps change. You can see cities grow. It's kind of like watching the cutscenes of the civilization, where you see these cities build up, these empires expand. And that's really cool. I love it for that. and he walks the best of his troops right into the heart of the Union soldiers, and everyone's like, this is ridiculous. And this instructor did all this geospatial analysis and said, hey, we couldn't see over the hill. And he doesn't have Jeb Stewart, who's like 60 miles out of the range, where he's usually riding around the sides, picking up all kinds of information and kind of picking out the location of the troops. And he didn't have that, so now he's just going by sight. And he couldn't see just over this hill, this little ridge. And so it makes perfect sense. He sees a really thin Union line. He doesn't have his normal information, intel. And so he walks, pick it up into a line, thinking that it's not that deep, but it is. And so that's kind of like they use these maps to explain historical mysteries. And so there's really cool things you can do. You have to just have that, to do it. So,
And I'm showing, this is Google Maps Gallery. And this is where people have uploaded maps that they've made using the same sort of tools, like Google Maps, Google Earth, and exported the KML file. And this is where and then people can vote on it. So this is something where if there's something that's of interest to you, so here's someone who's made the London of Sherlock Holmes and has annotated all these little spots.
Oh, wow. Oh my gosh.
So if let's say you're interested in something about London that Sherlock Holmes has some relevance to, you can download this, put that view in Google Earth, and it will download the KML file. And then you can upload that into your version of Google Earth or Google Maps and add your own annotations or change the icons or put them into layers. So because these tools are so easy to use and it's so easy to make certain kind of maps, people are doing it, and you can find.
Where's the download of the key? Can you be a little more specific about the KML?
Right. Margaret,
Well,
can I do that with your computer?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So here's this button called View in Google
Yeah.
Earth, and when I click that, it's going to be downloading. It's a KMZ file.
KMZ file, okay.
Just a compressed KML, but KML is a markup language that's made for geographic data.
Okay.
Do you have Google Earth on here, Margaret?
Yes.
Okay.
We installed it the other day.
Yeah. All right. So now I want to go find this file. There it is in the Finder. That's the file, and now I need to run Google Earth.
So the other thing to be mindful of is that Google Earth is something that you download. It's a program. And there are three options when you go to Google Earth right now. There's an app that you can get for mobile devices. There is a plugin for your browser, which allows you to look at Google Maps online, but get kind of the zoom-in view that Google Earth allows you in different perspectives. But then there's Google Earth as a program, and that is what Sid is opening up right now. And that allows you to do a lot of manipulation with it.
Okay.
So rather than just being a viewer, it's also a building tool, you could say. So when downloading the KML or KMZ file, it's so that you can open up that file in the program Google Earth.
So she just dragged and dropped the file from the downloads folder and just dragged it right into Google.
To Google Earth, but that's the Google Earth as a program.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. And so now I've got all this Google Earth stuff. It comes with a lot of data already, some of which may be of more interest to you than others. So
But you can take them off.
Yep, I can take them off, like borders, photos. But 3D buildings can be really cool. So here again, here's the little icons, and I clicked, and there's the information about that place.
Oh, and you've got pictures in there?
These
Are
are
these
the
pictures? No.
There's localized pictures if you want to
these
be
are
go on a tour.
Google's.
Okay.
And I'm having trouble making your screen bigger.
Just go
Just
to
hit the green.
dot, yeah.
Okay.
Maximize it.
Everybody's computer is different.
Oh,
So now
wow.
if I zoom in, and I've got 3D buildings turned on,
Whoa.
so I can keep zooming in more, or I could drag my little street view guy.
Look at that.
So they're modern pictures, but in places where it might be relevant. Oops.
Oh.
Well, the fish just came to lunch.
Okay, all right. All right, but this just gives you more power and for a free tool.
Yeah.
And you could be doing some of the same things, similar things Colin was doing, making paths. You can record little tours and things.
And then one of the things things you were showing me yesterday is that you can get historical maps of a lot of places, and so maybe if you wanted to play with this London of Sherlock Holmes thing, maybe you get a historical map of London that is from that time period, and you can see like the 3D buildings.
Yes,
They
yeah.
were shorter when it was Sherlock Holmes time or whatever.
How easy is it to
Well, they
overlay
didn't
a
have,
map?
what?
How easy is it to overlay a map? Say you have a map of London from, 15 to 68, something like that, from Elizabethan map of London. You want to overlay that on top of the map now, because you have this really cool map that shows how London was set up, and then I want to put that on a modern map of London in some British.
So you've got that individual, you've got that separate from this.
No, I'm asking
there was a
examples.
link
Yeah,
just
so how
there.
do you, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So the answer to that is, well, I don't know exactly how to do that, but what Sid has here is a set of maps that's a layer that have it's a data set that has already been attached.
That's what-
So you can just turn it on and turn it off.
Rumsey.
The Rumsey historical
Rumsey
maps.
historical maps.
Okay.
If you had your own map that you wanted to overlay on, I don't know how to do that. There probably is a way, but
Yeah, there is a way, and it's something that's kind of in between the two. If you go to the website of the David Rumsey Map Collection, there's a part of their website called there's a chunk of their website where volunteers have geo-rectified different old maps.
Yeah.
And you can look, if there's something of interest to you, then you can click some buttons and get it to show up in Google Earth. But doing the process yourself on your own map, it's possible. I just don't have that knowledge in my head of exactly how you do it, what tools you'd need.
And the way you got this map to show up was you got the Rumsey historical here, and then you find this guy. So anywhere there's a Rumsey historical map made, one of these little yellow-orange
right.
things
Will
will
show
show
up.
up. And then you can click on that and then decide how you want to handle it. Yeah. So London 1843. And then you double click on that, or how do you make that?
Let's see, I clicked on it. To
Oh,
pop up this
and then it
window.
says to
And then
overlay.
you overlay it, click on the thumbnails, and you click on that.
Okay, so it's not just a matter of like click and drag, line up the river.
Like if you had your own map somewhere else
Yeah.
and you're going to put a picture
Yeah.
in it.
That would be essentially the process, but you need the right tools that can
Okay.
deal with it.
All right.
yeah, it's
It's not a 12-second process.
yeah. Having done that in ArcGIS, it's very complicated because you have to adjust the size
Yeah.
of the map, and sometimes it's the way that your base map is curved or done. You'll have skewing in one way or another, so it's a very difficult
Okay.
process to make it match exactly.
So a lot of them are in urban type
Major
or,
cities.
yeah,
Or maps of entire countries.
right.
Yeah, so if that was something you wanted to do, it would be possible. It would take some effort to learn the theory, learn how maps are working, and learn the theory behind why they're straight or curved and how to. But it's been done. It's just something you'd want to. If you wanted to do that and you wanted pretty precise, you'd have to invest some effort.
How long did it take you to do it, and what program did you use?
When I've done that before, I was using ArcGIS,
Okay.
which is not going to be a subject for an active teaching lab because that's a very complicated GIS software
Okay.
that takes a lot of time to learn how to do. I needed a lot of help to be able to do things like that, and it was just a complicated process.
Yeah, but if you wanted to find out more, I think starting at the map library would be a good place. Talk to the Jamie Martindale, the map librarian,
Sure.
who could point you to where there might already be these sort of things that exist.
Yeah, that's a smart way to do it. Yeah. To mention the wheel. So.
Yeah.
We're out of time, so we want to respect everybody's time by ending. So thank you for coming. Thank you for your attention. Thank you again, Colin.
Thank you.